I find it incredible that the same term can be used with wildly different meanings depending on what hobby or world you happen to be inhabiting. It's kind of like the vocabulary version of homonyms, where it's words that sound the same but mean totally different things, but this is really different than a grammar lesson. Hi, I'm Nika Waters, and welcome to the Boat Galley Podcast. Today I'm sharing a couple of woodworking terms that I just find incredibly satisfyingly amusing. Today's episode of the Boat Galley Podcast is sponsored by Shambhala Sailing Adventures. Want to sample the liveaboard lifestyle before committing to it? Captain Suki Cannon at Shambhala Sailing Adventures has the experience just for you. Explore Bahamas paradise while enjoying Captain Suki's easygoing teaching style. Shambhala Sailing, way more than just a charter. Use coupon code SAILPARADISE for 10% off your next adventure. Check ShambhalaSailingAdventures.com to learn more. Let's go sailing! One of the projects that we're tackling this winter is building a new table for Calypso. Calypso's original table, which was built by Jeremy back in 1993, it was spectacular. There was storage in the top for things like spare Legos, extra napkins, maybe a couple of bottles of wine, and it also had 2 drawers, which are the only drawers we had on board. We had epic dinners around that table. From the very first one that we had people over really too soon after applying epoxy, and we had to kind of rock the plate up from the table after about every third bite to keep it from being permanently attached. We had a dinner for 10 people in Mississippi. We had Thanksgiving in the Bahamas with the kids. So many memories wrapped up in that table. Well, that table is no more. When we redid the port side to incorporate a pull-out double bunk, we had to make the settee seat wider. And the table wouldn't fit without really crunching your knees. There wasn't space between where we had the settee end and the table, the bulk of the table middle. We thought about modifying the table, but then after we got the second Bristol channel cutter and Mischief was in our lives, we actually borrowed her table for the summer and went cruising last summer with Mischief's table on board. And we loved that table. We've since moved it back onto Mischief, but Jeremy decided he was going to use Mischief's table, which was originally built by the Sam Morse Company, to build a table for Calypso. As Jeremy's been working on this table, he's had to learn or has incorporated some woodworking terminology into his vocabulary that normally I would think were only in my vocabulary as the cook on board. Jeremy built the table from mahogany planks that he bought from this neat lumber yard that's outside of Charlottesville. And he went up to our friend Dave's heated workshop, and with Dave's help has done a lot of work building the new table. They planed down the rough boards, made them an even thickness, and they squared up the edges, and then it was time for biscuits. Well, a biscuit to me is flour, butter, baking powder, and oven, but not these. Biscuits in woodworking are a kind of pointy-edged oval discs of thin wood that are meant for holding 2 pieces of wood together. You cut a sliced groove into each piece of wood that you're joining together on the sides. You glue in the biscuit and then glue the pieces of wood together. The concept is that these biscuits help planks stay together and resist warping. So that's one, biscuits. Biscuits are not just puffy things that taste good. They're also tiny pieces of wood that help bigger pieces of wood stay together. Once those biscuit-joined planks were glued all together, so it's not just that the biscuits hold it in, you also glue the whole plank along the edge. And the next step involved breadboards. Well, yeah, breadboards don't have anything to do with bread. And I think it's interesting to think about. I could probably weave some really interesting metaphor around woodworking and the fact that this is for a table and all the cooking terms that are involved, but I won't do that. But breadboards, if you put your planks that you've joined together with biscuits, then there's a piece of wood at the end that goes perpendicularly against the end of those joined planks. That thing, that's called a breadboard. I think what this does is it makes it stronger. So you have the biscuits along each plank and the glue that's holding them all together to help resist warping. And then this breadboard that goes on the end just sort of adds a little bit more stability to the whole thing. The breadboards go on to those planks that have all been now edge joined with biscuits. The breadboards are held onto the end of the planks with a sort of a long spline attachment, which is basically like a massively long biscuit. You cut a groove across all of them, and it fits in one teeny little sliver of wood that also goes into the side of the breadboard. You could, I suppose, use biscuits for it, but the spline just goes across every joint, and it makes it stronger altogether. Of course, biscuits and breadboards aren't the only things that are helping hold these table parts together. There are undersides that go on it that you don't see, obviously, because they're underneath the table. They're kind of inch-high wooden walls in a box shape on the underside of both pieces. So these make sure, or help again to ensure, that there's no warping that's going on with the boards that are put together with biscuits and breadboards, because you don't want your table to be warping. Once the table is fully done, and at this point we have 4 coats of varnish on it, probably 2 more coats of varnish to go, then we can have Jeremy's vocabulary with woodworking and my vocabulary in the kitchen. Those can come together when we'll put biscuits on breadboards onto the table, and it will all work together. I can't wait to share an Anchorage with you, and you can share your favorite new vocabulary terms, and then we can learn from each other, because isn't that what we get to do in this world? And how much fun is that? Thank you so much for listening to the Boat Galley podcast. We love it when we hear from our listeners. There are actually links to our emails in the show notes. We love it when you share us with your friends, and we love it when you don't forget to subscribe. 2 of these come out every single week. Have the most spectacular one.